I'm Sam Rose, and this is Commerce is Chaos, the podcast for consumer brand founders who know that building a business is messier than the highlight reel shows. Your supplier just missed their deadline, your top product is out of stock, and your competitors somehow just launched the same thing at half the price. Sound familiar? Every week, we dive into the real problems that keep founders up at night, from inventory disasters to supply chain nightmares, because surviving the chaos is what separates brands that fail from brands that scale. Well, Christina, you've built Willa'S Oat Milk from, speaking of far-reaching tech, you've built Willa'S Oat Milk from this heritage recipe passed down by your grandmother, and I'd love to hear that story. And I love grandmothers. To incredible distribution nationwide in grocery stores and markets, and of course direct to consumer. And I have lots of questions for you about like operational frameworks and big mistakes in packaging and all of that stuff. But before I jump into that, I want to set the stage with asking for just one systematic approach or process that you feel like changed your life forever after you put it in place. Like founder mode to scalable operations, even though you're sort of probably still in founder mode.
Oh my gosh, there are a million, and we're constantly trying to optimize our systems and processes. We're trying to integrate more, all the new AI tools. Well, a really basic one that comes to mind, because in the early days, I think I was still thinking that I needed to like get to inbox zero or something like that. And I was doing so much sales outreach myself. I use Superhuman. I've been using it since like 2020. I'm sure there are better tools that have come out since then, but now I'm like addicted.
Yeah.
And that has been life-changing. And some of my founder friends are like, you spend like $60 a month on email. And it's like, yeah. Do you like email? Yeah. Nobody likes email. Nobody is happy with email. Nobody's like, this is a really good way for humans to work. So I'm like, whatever can make that less
A little
painful
easier.
and help me to feel less like I'm missing something important, like that has been huge. And I have labels for investors. I have labels for sales stuff. So yeah, that. And then, if you have multiple inboxes from your business, you can create up splits so you can see all of them. So that was like life-changing. And I still don't think I'm probably using the platform to I'm probably using like 10% of its capacity, because they keep adding all new integrations. But for me, that was huge. And so now my co-founders use it. People on our team use it, especially the ones that are more, doing selling. And then other systems for the whole team, especially, I'm trying to think. Yeah, I mean, we are really obsessed with margin. So we're constantly creating spreadsheets where we contingency plan and we put in a bunch of different scenarios. Like, what if we can save a penny here? What if we can save a penny here? If we do a really big run, how does that impact cash flow versus margins? Like, we're constantly looking at those numbers. And, that can be really painstaking work. And sometimes you
Yeah.
go down a rabbit hole and then you don't find gold at the end of it. And so, that I think it can be kind of exhausting, but I think at the same time, we're really proud that we've improved our contribution margins significantly year over year. We improved our gross margins like 10 points year over year just by optimizing our processes and, finding, synergistic opportunities with our vendors. And our team has been really creative around that. And so, I'm just really grateful for our team's work on all of that, honestly.
That's incredible. I mean, and also the tirelessness that it takes to sort of, run a calculation like that, knowing maybe we find gold at the end of the rainbow here. Maybe we don't. But if you don't have that, I think it's two things. It's discipline and then just like complete, like infinite energy to stick into it. And those two things combined allow you to kind of like, really optimize a business over time. And I so admire that approach. I think the temptation is to say, well, this is just what it is, and I'm going to set it and forget it, and I'm going to move on to another task, and perhaps a more appealing task, at least for a certain mindset, and particularly like a certain founder mindset. Like the fun things to do are like to create content, to tell stories, to write the newsletter, and like just having the discipline and the energy to be in the weeds in a spreadsheet saying, where can I find a cent? Because that cent will scale. Like that is where it's at.
Mm-hmm.
um,
Totally. And same thing with
and
cash flow management. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean
right.
to cut you off.
No, you go.
I was going to say same thing with cash flow management. We've been really actually doing a ton of painstaking work around how we manage cash flow and how we manage, invoice financing, and that too can feel like the opposite of creative work. But I think one of the things that I've learned from our ops team, and just, having been through all kinds of ups and downs the last 5 years, is when you look at a challenge as like, oh, this is a big challenge, we have to figure it out. And you kind of like frame it as like this really intense obstacle that's going to be unfun. It is not going to go the same way as if you look at it as an opportunity for creativity. Like, okay, you're telling me that, there's a shortage of coconut sugar. We're not going to find margin in coconut sugar. What if we try this? What if we try that? And just like trying to find the intersection between creativity and operations can make it so much more fun for everybody, and allow
Yeah.
people to come up with ideas that they might have been afraid to say otherwise, you know. So that's been something that I've been seeing a lot just from our amazing team over the past year in particular.
Well, and I think you touch on another really important point there too, which is that like numbers can be scary. Most of this is arithmetic, though, really,
True.
for a consumer brand.
Yeah.
So it's like a mission of mine to, just be one of the voices. Not that I'm like particularly mathematical or anything, but like to be a voice of sort of demystification of it. Like these numbers are numbers that like it's basic elementary school math. You can get comfortable with them. And when you get comfortable with them, you can start having fun. And if you spread that feeling across an entire team, then you're right. Like they can, it's like a beautiful mind moment. Like you can start playing in the numbers and start seeing things. I remember there was like a tipping point for me as an operator where I just like, I started to be able to see things in a spreadsheet and make creative decisions from there. And it was so empowering and so freeing. It was like a whole other area of play. And it happened when I overcame my fear of like breaking a spreadsheet or getting a number wrong. Like, okay, maybe it's going to be wrong for a minute. But like the beautiful thing about like a number is that you can change it in the spreadsheet. And yeah, I think you unlock like a whole other level of gameplay when you get there.
Yeah, that resonates so much. I mean, I feel like fear for me has been like the constant battle
Yeah.
for this whole journey. And, that like intimidation around numbers and breaking spreadsheets is real. And I think there's also like a lot of shoulds that come up. There's a lot of voices in our industry that are like, you should have a 30% contribution margin always, and you should do this and you should do that. And if you're not doing this, you're doing it wrong. And I think those voices are like the least helpful when you're trying to solve a problem.
Yeah.
It's like you are where you are, the numbers are where they are, but you can find ideas in that.
Yeah. Um, Shifting the conversation a little, but I'm jumping off from exactly what you're saying. The power dynamics in creating and managing relationships with retailers always comes to mind in a moment like this, especially when we're talking about fear, because this was my lived experience. And I'm curious if you have a similar story. At the very beginning, you're like, is anyone going to like me? Are they going to like my thing? Are they going to say yes? Are they going to take it? And like, those are financial make or breaks. They're also emotional make or breaks. And as you grow and scale, the power dynamic, it starts to shift a little bit. People want your thing. And you get to sort of choose and maybe use numbers to help you choose who you're going to do business with. And I always found that fluctuation, and it is a constant flux. It's not like one day you're in the driver's seat and everyone's just chasing you, or at least probably not. It wasn't for me. But in that moment of realizing that you maybe can choose the right relationships, and the right relationships that are not only going to be good for brand awareness, of course, and growth, but also profitable. Do you have like a way or a fallback in assessing retailers beyond just like, well, this is going to be $1 million account, but is it going to be a profitable $1 million account?
Right.
I'm curious to hear how you start to synthesize that, uh, problem.
Yeah, I've always had a lot of anxiety around saying yes to business. And I think it's because my first job out of college was as a business analyst at Target. So I was like managing inventory for frozen food. It was not a good fit for me. After that, I went into advertising and strategy. I was like, this is not me. But I watched how, frankly, there were businesses that went out of business because they put them on shelf and they didn't turn soon enough. And the merchant team wasn't able to be patient with a new brand. So that experience taught me like getting on the shelf, that's actually not the hard part. The hard part, the assignment starts when you're on the shelf. And we've deferred a lot of big business that I think a lot of people would probably, look at our history of that and be like, wow, you guys are crazy. What are you doing? But if you can't make money at it, if it means that you're just going to increasingly be in the red, and it means that if you look at the cash that you're actually going to make, if you're not actually going to get paid, we know the KH and Unifies of the world and how that works, then there's just a lot of things to look at. And I think each retailer has its own list of pros and cons. So one retailer you might want a really strong margin from, another one you're like, oh, they pay really quickly, so
Right.
the margin doesn't matter as much because I'm getting paid right away. But what we tend to look at is this a place where our target consumer shops? And do they have good marketing programs that are in alignment for our brand, that are going to allow us to, get in front of their guests and make sure that they know we exist and buy it easily? The margins, of course, are a huge thing. Our goal is always to have a 30% contribution margin. If we launch a new product, usually that first run is not 30% because we do a smaller run. It's kind of a test run, but if we make sure we actually have like a genuine path to get there. And then distributor relationships, so we're selling direct to Target, which is amazing. And Target has historically had really great programs for diverse and female founded brands. Uh, you know, a lot of founders I know love Costco because they pay right away. We're now working with Rainforest on the East Coast for all of our independent grocers, and we had been wanting and fighting to build that partnership for years before it finally happened this year. And now we're there. Willa'S is their only plant-based milk, and they're just an incredible partner in every way. So, yeah, for us, it's really, is the target there? Do they have good marketing programs? What do the margins and cash flow look like? And then who's the distributor? But,
And
there's all kinds of nuances beyond that too.
yeah, there's the infinite game. A limitless number of variables that go into
Yes.
all of these things. I want to talk about velocity as one of those variables, because you mentioned these new relationships. Do you have like a first 30, 60, 90-day velocity playbook? Are you looking for specific indicators in the early stages to tell you whether or not like that sample run is maybe going to turn into like a larger run, and now you got to plan for cash flow? And then conversely, if it's not too scary to talk about, what happens when it goes wrong and like it's going too slowly and you've got to scramble to like make things move?
Yeah, I mean, my background is in strategy, so I'm obsessed with all kinds of consumer research, and I try to get it anywhere. Like I'm looking at those early customer reviews, I'm looking at the emails and the Instagram DMs from people who just found the product for the first time. Um, I, we launched these new kids products right around Expo West, so we got to sample hundreds, if not, thousands of people and get real time feedback, including some nutritionists and dietitians and pediatricians who came by. And so, I try to consume all of that. And those conversations also inform the margin conversations, right? Like, oh, this ingredient is really important to people. It may be really expensive, but it's important to us. It's important to our values, and people appreciate it. And then I think with the velocities, you're looking for those early signs, but I think you also have to be patient. People need to see a brand many times before they buy it. It takes time, if you're on target.com, for example, and you just launched, it takes time for that algorithm to figure out what works,
Yeah.
And so you're doing testing and learning. The way that we approached it is we did some small tests that were of bigger marketing programs that we wanted to do, but we wanted to start small, not blow our wad and then find out, oh, that influencer doesn't really actually, they're just not as, their fans are not as interested in Willa'S. Want to learn that
Yeah.
early. Those keywords on target.com, are they working? Or are they not working? So it's just a constant like learning and retooling. And then when things start to work, then we double down. But that does require a buyer that's got more patience than like the first couple of weeks of sales.
And that must impact your approach to product innovation too. You just mentioned your new kids SKUs. What are you looking for in a go no go for an investment of that magnitude to say, hey, we're going to go through a whole new SKU or a whole new line, as opposed to like, you know, growing what we have, and that's got to be such a fun and constant trade off.
Yeah, it's like a combination of like intuition, research, little qualitative signals, and then testing and learning with our team, because all of our products are created in-house. We have our own IP. So it all starts with our internal team. Each of our products have had a little bit of a different innovation story. The Willa'S Unsweetened Original was actually our second product, and it was just one that I felt like we had to make, even though I didn't have actually a lot of research at the time. And then it quickly became our top seller online, because when people search for a healthier plant-based milk, it checks all the boxes and it tastes really good. And that's an unusual combination in our in our category. Um, and then our chocolate oat milk was actually inspired by our fans. We were doing all these events at WeWorks. We were making matcha lattes or cocktails. People kept saying, my guilty pleasure at night is drinking chocolate milk. Would you guys ever do a chocolate milk?
Cute.
It was like really cute the first time. And then it was like every single event, somebody came over and said that.
Yeah.
So we thought, okay, we have to make a chocolate milk. These kids' products, pediatricians and parents have been dying to have us make a mini grab and go size kids milk for years. I didn't listen for a long time, to be honest, because I thought the margins weren't going to be strong enough. But after after I had our Target broker, who was a fan of Willa'S way before we started working with her, she told me that she packs Willa'S Unsweetened Original in her suitcase on vacation because she's worried her daughter won't be able to drink anything else offered at restaurants. I was like, okay, maybe we should dig into this a little bit more. And then, the buyer very quickly got behind it, and all of a sudden we were creating kids' milks that had as much protein and calcium as dairy, all from real ingredients, way less sugar, and that we had done rounds and rounds of testing with kids to make sure that like kids 2 to 18 loved the taste. And it just kind of came together.
Yeah.
And now I actually feel like it's the most meaningful product we've ever made, because kids who don't get calcium at a young age, who are vegan or dairy free, are at a really high risk of osteoporosis later in life, which I didn't know. And then equally, most kids these days aren't getting the DHA they need for brain health. So we added that from a seaweed source that's really clean. So yeah, I'm really excited about these products, not only because they're solving these big problems that no one else in the category has, but because they're so aligned with our values and our vision to create the healthiest products available to help clean up our food system and have a net positive impact, not net neutral, a net positive impact on the health of people on the planet.
Um, something that you said in there I want to pause on, which is that was a decision that you got to make with your head and your heart. And I feel like some of the most powerful brands and powerful decisions within those brands really do combine those two things. Like you can't just look at the numbers, you got to listen to people. And if you listen to them long enough and they're loud enough, then it's like, oh my gosh, I just feel like this is the right time. And whether it's heart or gut or some, I don't know, something in the middle of your body, you're like, okay, this is, you know, I will figure out a way to make it work with the numbers because I can tell in my gut that this is the right thing to do. And conversely, it's like, well, here's obviously like a very a very high potential dollar opportunity, and I'm going to orchestrate the product development in a way that like, fills so many like quiet, unspoken sometimes needs for customers. When you're doing your research, I'd love to know like what tools are you using, either where you're sort of like outside listening, maybe things that you read, blogs that you point to for market trends, or things that you subscribe to. And then of course, I know you have like a really big internal research team too, that I'm sure is using like somewhere cool.
We don't have a big internal research team, but we've gotten very scrappy.
Big brains.
We've gotten really scrappy with the resources that we can beg, borrow, and steal. So like he found me. Somebody from the New York Public Library reached out to me, and I then asked him, hey, do you have like Mintel reports, Statista reports? Can never say that word. And he was like, oh yeah. And so I'm able to get all kinds of free research from the New York Public Library, which any of us can. Yeah.
The library like strikes again.
I know. And it's all virtual. I've never even met him in real life. We just email. I'll say, oh, could you send me this? Do you have that? So that's really helpful when you have an idea and you're like, this is a really great idea, but is this where the market's headed? Is this what people are looking for? Are there a lot of occasions and use cases? Is this a ritual, or is this something somebody's going to drink every once in a while? So that's kind of where I combined like the intuition and the heart with the research. And then, I try to encourage anyone on our team who's doing sampling at events or at stores to just be really curious. Like, what questions are people asking? Really listen, like dig in. I think it's really easy to be like, I'm just selling, but like that's a huge opportunity to just do a ton of qualitative research. Like, you don't necessarily have to go pay to do an expensive focus group when you've already got people talking to people who are learning about the product for the first time. Right. And then I think customer reviews, I think we all have a complicated relationship with Amazon reviews and D2C reviews, because you get the most passionate people on both sides. And then sometimes you get, someone who's like, the glass jar broke. And you're like, these aren't in glass jars. How, I don't understand. Like, some of it's not helpful information, but I think sometimes you have to kind of put your ego aside. And if people are having the same complaint over and over, or they are saying they wish your product had something that it doesn't, that might be an opportunity for a new product or a change to a product as well. But you've got to, it's triangulating all of these things, and also trying to pull yourself away from your attachment to what you think it has to be.
Yeah. Willingness to learn. And it's such an interesting, dichotomy is the right word to use here. Like, to be in teaching mode, I'm telling you about my product, I'm selling something, you're sort of like in exposition mode. And then also to be able to like really fluidly switch into ingestion mode, learning mode. I'm listening, I'm taking notes. I feel like that's one of the kind of cardinal values of a really great entrepreneur, is just to be able to kind of like weave back and forth from that. They're really different headspaces. I associate learning with like sitting upright in a chair and just like being spoken
raising your hand.
And the truth is, it is very kinetic when you're evangelizing or selling a product. It's like you've got to be ready to switch from telling someone about, I don't know, the nutritional value of your thing, to asking them a question about their preferences in like the space of a second. And I really admire founders like you that do it really, really well.
Lots of practice,
Lots of practice. Yes, that is true. It can be a learned skill. I believe that. Let's talk about supply chain. And you've chosen, and I admire this too, oat milk. Seasonal ingredient sourcing, co-manufacturers, probably maybe many, cold chain logistics. Like, that's a lot. How did you make that bold choice? And then also, how did you de-risk it for yourself? Do you have sort of like okay, I'm going to look for these things from my vendors and these things in my good supplier relationships. And these are my criteria, like these are my have to haves when I'm going to work with someone who's going to help me bring this dream to life.
Yeah, in the early days, this really came down to the brilliance of my sister and co-founder Elena and Laura and their background in all things food and beverage manufacturing. That was not a world that I came from. Although I think, I think most founders probably have the common sense to say, I probably shouldn't get all of my ingredients from one vendor, put all of my eggs in one
Yeah.
basket. But yeah, we started with oat milk because it's it really aligns with our values. It's organic oats are a carbon sequester. They help reverse climate change. Most people aren't allergic to oats. So if you've got a nut allergy or a dairy allergy, it's not an issue. They use way less water than any nuts. They've got protein and fiber, which are so important. So there are all these reasons. Plus, of course, my grandmother was making oat milk for us kids and grandkids, and we had her recipe. Now, our newer products have more protein because we're also adding some really simple, clean, organic pea protein. But when it came to the supply chain, we redesigned the way that plant-based milk is made. Willa'S uses the whole oat groat. We're the only ones. All of these co-manufacturers, millers, oat vendors were like, yeah, so obviously you're going to filter out the protein and the fiber, and then you're going to use the sugar, and then we'll have a landfill come and pick up the waste, and then you can process it to make it sweeter, or you can just use our oat base, which is already pretty sweet. And we didn't want to do it that way. We knew that that wasn't aligned with our values. We wanted to create something that wasn't super sweet, had, a lower glycemic index, had the protein and the fiber, wasn't creating a bunch of food waste. And that also forced us to create a lot of relationships with different vendors and partners. So while that took a long time to do, it was for the best. It created a more stable business, and now we really own our whole supply chain. But we have been through the gauntlet. I mean, after we got through all the challenges of 2020, then it was like the worst oat crop in the US, going all the way back to the beginning of the record books, which is like the late 1800s. Yeah, because of all
No, I'm
the
in learning
fires.
mode.
Yeah, all the fires and droughts we had on the West
Yeah.
Coast, just like decimated the oat crops. And thankfully, this was a moment of luck in some ways. Will's was one of the only, if not the only, organic brands at the time. So we were able to garner organic oats from Estonia and Europe, which of course was more expensive. But it also kind of taught us that even if you have a supply chain issue like that, even if one of your ingredients goes through the roof in terms of cost, if you're constantly working on all of the different angles around how you can improve your margins, you can still find margin improvements, even if that happens. So it was a really good learning because, as we talk about tariffs or whatever is coming next, it kind of gave our team the confidence to say, okay, yeah, we've been through this, we're going to figure it out, and we've got all these different ways of tackling margin, and those ideas are fluid enough that we can change them and change course because we know what we control internally, and we know that we've got more backup vendors and suppliers and things like that.
Yeah. I think one of the things that is so risky about a business like yours is that the timeline of your supply chain is really short, right? Like you're making a fresh thing that needs to be sold and consumed. And I know there's, shelf stability is a thing. But simultaneously, and just, thinking back to my own experience in like, spatula world and pillow world and all of the other hard goods, you don't really have the luxury of saying, well, I bought inventory a year ago at a lower price before the spike. And so while everyone else is maybe taking a price increase, I can be that stable thing. I've got to imagine, and now I'm just projecting, so you got to start talking in a
we've,
second.
we've all been
But
through it.
how do you make decisions in that, like when to take a price increase,
Mm.
or how to adapt to a shrinking margin, and maybe when to like make a business decision to absorb that on behalf of your customers, whether it's being driven by inflation or by tariffs or by a supply chain issue like a drought or a crop shortage, versus passing that cost along to your customers, which of course probably happens in heavy collaboration with your retail partners.
Yeah, I mean, it really depends. I feel like there's no like one size fits all answer. And there are trade-offs, right? No matter what you do, whether you raise the prices or you change up the ingredients, or, there's trade-offs no matter what. So I feel like in those decisions, there's never like one perfect decision. But um, the way that we have approached it is with pricing. I really like to look at what the market is looking for, um, but in the early days, we didn't really have that luxury. So we had the super high price point. I mean, it was like $7.99 in most stores. There were stores in New York City that were selling at $9.99, and we had competitors that were less than half that, or even a third of that.
Yeah.
And um, I I think, that was one of the reasons we started in Erewhon and co-ops. You know what I mean? There were places where we knew our target was, and people would be seeing premium brands and be looking for trying new things, even if they were a higher price point. What's been interesting is because Will's owns its own process, and we can make all of these process improvements and try new things. And because we use the whole oat and we're not wasting all this oat material, we've been able to keep finding margin each year. And a lot of Will's competitors have been increasing their prices 20 or 30% each year, and then doing like heavy discounts and promos. So they're high, low,
Yeah.
high, low. And I
Chaos.
it is kind of chaotic, but it's like, you sort of just have to figure out, where do I fit in this landscape? What are people willing to pay? If you want to be accessible, like, where's that happy medium? What are the right retailers? And I think you have to kind of look at each opportunity with each retailer, each partner, as its own thing. Like, what can this offer us? Is this, Amazon's not a super high margin channel, but they pay quickly and it's great marketing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's like the whole marketing funnel happens in like a second there, which is pretty incredible.
Yeah.
So I think you look at each one as its own, but then you also have those parameters in the back of your mind that are like, okay, if I've got a negative margin, this is going to be a very expensive deal, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm curious how you thought about that as you were building your businesses.
Well, I think we had the advantage of pretty strong margins that were, well, we were building in a time perhaps of greater stability. So I was
Mm.
advantaged by that. Um, we, not unlike you, started to really uh, own more and more of our supply chain. And so that allowed us to find additional margin as we went. Uh, and my struggles were slightly different. It wasn't the volatility of it. It was that we were selling a premium commodity. Like, everyone has a spatula already, right? So like my job was to be like, but don't you want another one? and, and so um and it wasn't a terribly expensive thing either, and we had a lifetime guarantee. So I mean, I was like intentionally saying, come back for the next thing, don't come back of more, of what you bought the first time,
Mm.
with a policy like that. That's not to say that people didn't, and I'm grateful that they did. But we were really creating, I didn't even have the acronym for this. It was like, I'm interested in lifetime value of the customer. And I didn't even know what that was. I just knew that I wanted to make friends that like loved the things that I loved. And that if they happened to buy a spatula from me, like, that version of friendship was being a customer. um, so our challenge was really in like, ultimately trying to convince everybody that our thing was better and therefore worth an incremental premium. It wasn't a 20% or even a 20 or a $20 premium over the competition. It was just like, would you like to pay $1.50 more for this? If yes. um,
I was
so
one of those
slight,
people.
yeah. Oh, yeah. And we're friends.
Exactly.
It worked.
Definitely worked. And the wire cutter reviews also, I think, were pretty amazing. But I think that's just a testament to the product you designed.
Yeah, I had a somewhat singular obsession with the product at that moment in time,
It
and
shows.
um, just kind of so badly wanted to share it with the world. And I've said this in the past, this was not like a business school thesis type of a business. This was just like not that I didn't take it seriously, but it was just joy. And then from there, everything else followed. Um, but if I had been thinking it through, or writing down my thesis, or maybe like gone to strategy school with you, or had any experience previously in like consumer goods or retail or any of it, I probably would have built something different. And, I have no idea if that would have been more successful or not, because what made it work was that I was in love
Mm.
with the mission.
That has to be
And,
part of the reason it was successful. It has to
yeah,
be.
yeah. Just but if I could have been in love with like jewelry or something, that might have been great. So that was a little bit of a tangential answer. But we did find ourselves in that struggle of like trying to talk to the right retailers who believed in it the way that we did. No one's going to believe in it as much as you do, but like maybe after a fashion. And I think one of the later signals that started to get the most movement for us with retailers is that people realized we were serious operators. And so the product then became, and like your product, it's like, well, that's kind of table stakes. Everybody just knows that this is delicious oat milk, or this is like a good kitchen tool. And then what they were looking for was like, well, if we award you this business, are you going to be able to handle it? And that really transitioned how I was talking to retailers too. I realized that I was spending a lot of time evangelizing maybe the wrong things, like that it was they didn't need to be sold on that. They got it. They got that there was a customer. They got that there was a need. They had notes on price. We did our best to like ratchet it down over time. But they were like, how big is your warehouse, and where is your supply chain, and like what stack are you using? Like, when they're huge retailers asking you like where you do your project management, you're like, oh,
Wow.
okay,
Yeah.
that means something to them now. And that ended up being a really big proof point.
Suppose it makes sense, right? Like if they don't have the product, they can't sell it. There's no point if it's a beautiful product or the most brilliant design or brings so much joy to people when they're cooking. Yeah.
And for those reasons, and because I was having fun on the learning teaching journey, we vertically integrated. And I'm so curious to hear more about your vertical integration. Do you own your supplier, or where's, as much as you can disclose, like tell me how the machine works?
We work with a co-manufacturer, but our team flies out for every run and leads that. And our co-manufacturer doesn't have like full awareness or understanding of what is happening or how.
By design, because you have IP to protect.
Exactly. Yeah. And we're always looking for other ways to vertically integrate, and sometimes we think, oh, we should just build our own plant, but that is a whole other sign up,
Yeah.
So yeah, I think even when we were trying to figure out the right packaging, this is where like heart and strategy kind of like battled, because in the early days I really wanted to do glass bottles. And then I remember talking to other founders who were using glass or who had tried to, and they're like, and then we just had to wrap everything in bubble wrap, which really defeated the purpose, So that dream died quickly. Although maybe someday we'll figure out a way to do glass. But part of the reason we chose Tetra Pak is a lot of the things you were saying. It didn't used to be the most sustainable, but they've made huge strides over the last 10 years. They have a long way to go still, but the packaging technology creates a vacuum seal. So it actually is shelf stable. We can sell it on Amazon. It's often sold through cold chain in the refrigerator and in stores. Most stores sell it in the fridge because that's where people are looking for fresher, simpler ingredients. But yeah, like the packaging was just looking for alignment around our values and what we could actually, maintain and manage as a team. It also allows us to do larger runs and allows us to work with bigger co-manufacturers, which of course opens more doors, like you're saying, on the retail side. So, it is funny though, when you find yourself just talking about what you're passionate about the business and what you think everybody must care about. It's kind of like corporate underpants, right? It's like, did you know how hard I worked on this thing? And everyone's like, I actually don't care about that. I want to talk about this.
Totally. Yeah, the first few times it happened, I was like, oh, really? it threw me off my my rhythm because I didn't have, I don't have a canned response for like, I mean, I know what the square footage of our fulfillment center is, but that wasn't like part of my spiel.
It does kind of sound like a test, like,
yeah,
you know.
it probably was. It was. I still don't know if I passed or failed, but you know, having a team that's managing so cross-functionally all of these things. What we're talking about here is cross-functional understanding and business management, really. And you as the founder, as I as a founder, I knew that answer. But I had to make sure that I knew those sorts of answers. And so my job became to sort of like just orchestrate all of the specialists. And that felt weird for me because I had maybe mentally typecast myself as someone that would be specialized. And I certainly had areas of knowledge that were like, I mean, extraordinarily deep, like, deep enough that it could start a consulting business around it as the next chapter, like really, globally narrow knowledge that I ended up sort of acquiring through this process. But then my job was just to like keep people talking. I was like, I know a lot about this one thing. I want to be the type of person that knows a lot about one thing. That's just my stuff, mentally. But then my job is just like to be so general, like truly like jack of all cards, right? Is jack of all trades, sorry. Although Jack's a card too. And I don't know if you've had like a personal experience around just that need to like know so much, but then trust that like the specialists within your big organization have got it.
Yeah, I think a lot of times founders make the mistake, especially in the early days when you don't have all the resources for lots and lots of people and the most expensive people in different fields or whatever. I remember when we were exploring going on Amazon when the pandemic was kind of starting, and I just kept saying like, "Oh, it's so expensive." And then I don't know anything about Amazon. So my first thought was like, "Oh, I need to go talk to people and learn about Amazon." And then I very quickly realized, "Oh, I am not an expert in this. And people who have expertise in this, like they have serious knowledge that unless I spend all of my time doing that, I will never have, you
Right.
know." Um, and I find like a lot of that's a common hurdle. Like I talk to so many early stage founders and I'm like, "You're managing Amazon yourself. Like, is that where you want to become an expert? Do you just want to become an expert on Amazon? If not, hire someone who's a pro, even if like
Yeah.
they've got a day job and they're down to do this for you part-time." And I think, I'm feeling the same thing you are talking about is like all of these specialists and, you're trying to learn from them and trying to, show up to every conversation with like questions, but at the same time recognizing there's so much they know and are dealing with day to day that you don't have the hours, right? So
You have to
I
trust.
find that challenging sometimes because it's like, talking to somebody about Target.com media. I know enough to be dangerous from my marketing background, but like hearing about how they're going in and tweaking bids and the different ways they're looking at the numbers, it's thank goodness for all these experts, honestly. Same thing with supply
Yeah.
chain. I would be a terrible supply chain manager, like the worst. It's just like so many details and everybody's giving you information that's in like different metrics. So you have to like convert everything,
Right.
you know.
Yeah.
Um,
Spreadsheet
yes,
transformations
yeah.
and
It's like, oh, we're
like,
talking about pounds over here, but and so yeah, I guess, yeah, I think that's just must be one of the hurdles we all have to kind of overcome is like learning to be more generalist, but also learning to how to ask the right questions, even when other people are so much more knowledgeable about something than you are.
thank you to the experts.
Yeah,
Thank you, all
seriously,
of you.
seriously. The people who are good at things that I will never be good at.
Yeah. um, okay, you've shared a couple of tools that you rely on, and of course, like the reliance on the people, and on gut. So to kind of bring us toward the end of the conversation here, I've got Superhuman, I've got the New York Public Library,
Yeah.
I've got trust in expertise, I've got progressive disclosure to co-man so that your IP stays your IP, but also that you can get the job done with just enough trusted counterparties. Are there any other like foundational pillars of making it all work that show up for you after I say those things?
Mental health. And I mean that really deeply. Like, I went through some of the most difficult parts, I hope, of my life going through all of this. I got diagnosed with cancer in the early days of Willa's. I went through chemo through the pandemic in New York City. Thankfully, I'm cancer free. It's very unlikely to ever come back. I had like the most incredible response to treatment. I think I'm in the top 5% for breast cancer survivors. But you know, I think before that time, which was very challenging and dark, and I worked full time through all of my chemo, radiation, immunotherapies, lumpectomy surgery, lymph node surgery. I think going into that time, I was like one of these people who's like, I'm just going to outwork everyone. I'm going to work
Mm.
harder because that's what you do as a founder. You just are down to work all the hours and the weekends and make it work until you can build your team and scale up. And when I was diagnosed, and it was a very dark time in New York. I finally was like, oh my gosh, I need to take my own role in my health. I have agency in this, right? I have a role in my outcome through all of this, and so I really prioritized working out, meditation, therapy, which I think, frankly, every founder should do because this is like a real lesson in facing your ego and all your insecurities. They're all going to come up. And so you can either grow from them or have them limit you. And so, yeah, I think that really taught me that, like, even if you're not going through a health crisis as a founder, you're going through so much day to day. You want to be as clear headed as possible. You want to be able to think expansively, not have this voice in the back of your head that might say, oh, you got this bad news today. That means everything's going downhill. Um, I think that's something that for me has just been absolutely critical. And you can see if you look at the history of Willa's, like the times when we came out with new products or we had like big positive news, those often were born out of times when, as a team, all three of us founders, our team are prioritizing our mental health and we're able to get to that creative space. So I think that's one that is easy to discount, but should never be discounted.
Wow, I'm deeply touched. um, and one thing that brings up for me, I talk about joy a lot, and I often find it easy to access. It's easy
Mm,
for me to have fun in a hard task because I turn it, it's like a Mary Poppins thing. I'm like, let's play a game.
I love
Um,
it.
and it doesn't always come naturally, right? Like sometimes you need a team or an outside sounding board, whether that's another founder group that you're in, or truly like a therapist, like a trained individual to help access that. And maybe what you're accessing isn't this ecstatic idea of joy, but it's just sort of like moving through, right? Like maybe it's
Yes.
just the next right thing. And hearing you reflect on that experience and on how you built around yourself to get through it, um, really brings me down into that feeling of like, okay, that doesn't have to spontaneously combust, right? Like
Right.
sometimes we need to build for that. And as builders, I think that almost product mentality, like, how am I going to make a little machine to make this thing better? Like that can work on you too.
Yeah.
And
So true.
um, yeah. So I love that you shared so openly and freely and honestly about that. And it's a real gift. Thank you.
And yeah, other founders too. I mean, we would not have gotten to this point if it hadn't been for all these other founders, people like you who are down to meet and, answer questions and share learnings. And, so much about CPG and any kind of packaged goods is about avoiding the pitfalls, but you don't know what those are unless you talk to somebody else who's kind of been through the trenches before you. So,
Well,
I
that
just,
to me,
yeah.
oh, go ahead. Sorry.
I just love that the founder community, especially I've found in anything that's like a good, is so generous with their time and open to answering questions. I suppose because so many of us really needed that ourselves and are happy to pay it forward. But yeah,
Well, on that note, and the paying for it note, that sounded to me like an invitation for people to come ask you for advice. So, whether someone wants to come and compliment you or get advice from you, Christina, where can they find you? And what is one thing that they could be doing that would be most helpful to you or to Willa'S?
Oh gosh. Well, yeah, you're welcome to email Willa'S team at willa'skitchen.com. And I'm one of the people who sees all those emails. There are a lot of founders out there. So if there's somebody that you really admire, don't be afraid to email them. You would be shocked at how many amazing, famous people who've started businesses are happy to answer an email. And then, oh gosh.
Especially if they use superhuman.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And they can actually like make sense of their inbox as they're getting flooded. And then I'm sorry, tell me your second question again.
Oh, just what can we do to pay it forward to you or to Willa'S?
Yeah. Well, you can find Willa'S at willa'skitchen.com. You can find our brand new kids products at 650 Target stores, so most of them. And our leaders just launched in a bunch of Target stores and a bunch of independent stores across the country. You can also find it on Amazon. And if you would like some coupons, we are always happy to send those to people who are like, I haven't tried it before. I'd like to try it. So please feel free to reach out. And we also have a 100% satisfaction guarantee. So just like you, Sam, like we're really open to feedback and we like to make it right.
I love that. And just on cue, I dropped my AirPod. Thank you again for joining me. This has been a really insightful and delightful conversation. And we'll see you soon.
Thank you. Such a fun conversation. Really appreciate you having me.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for joining us for another episode of Commerce is Chaos. If you're listening, I have a feeling you know just how much good leaving a 5-star review can do for a team. Drop us a review on Apple Podcasts and subscribe to Commerce is Chaos wherever you get your podcasts. Don't forget to subscribe to our Substack, also called Commerce is Chaos, for more good stuff and actionable tools to build your business.